So yeah, and there we go. So let me do the beautiful share my screen thing. Here we
And
go.
I'm just going to welcome everyone again now that we are
Okay,
recording.
sorry.
No, you're fine. Excellent. So good morning, everyone. My name is Annie. I'm a public services librarian at Kent County Public Library. Today we are partnering with University of Maryland Extension Kent County for the first in our Get Ready to Garden series. This is a 4-part series, so you are here today for new plants for 2021, and then we have 3 additional programs coming up that we would love to have you back for.
Share screen.
You can register through the the library's online calendar, and I'm going to put the link for that into the chat box if you have not yet found our calendar. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this program over to Sabine, and she is going to give us a preview of some of this year's plants, let us know what we might want to consider about whether the hottest, newest, trendiest is what we should go with, or whether tried and true is better.
Okie dokie, well, here we go. So like I said, I had a lot of fun trying to figure this all out. And I will say up front that I didn't necessarily, I went through lots and lots of different websites, and I didn't necessarily find like, this is like the newest plant that everybody is carrying. So I will give you a bit of an overview of plants that may be out there, but mainly what I really want to do is kind of like give you the tools to figure out, whether you need the newest, hottest plant and how you can discern whether you want the newest, hottest plant. So that's kind of what the goal is. I'll show you some that caught my eye, but it very much depends on your own, preferences, growing conditions, and all that kind of stuff. So here we go. So when you are looking for these new and improved plants, right? Well, first of all, why are there all these plants, right? It's often driven by consumer demand, and obviously also, if everybody just kept selling the same stuff, well, then eventually, I guess that would not be so good for the industry. So as it's the same thing as with fashion, right? Every year there needs to be something fashionable, but of course we need to get consumerism. We need to keep that going. So the first thing you want to look at is what exactly is the improvement? Is this something that is a plant that is maybe disease resistant, or that will, mature earlier? Well, if you live up in like upstate New York and you want to grow tomatoes, you don't want a tomato that's going to take forever to mature. So, a tomato that matures earlier, that is fantastic. Maybe it's more cold resistant. So maybe it's more less prone to bolting, that would be nice in our climate. So just because something is new, right? These catalogs, these places, they sell all over the US. So first of all, you got to figure out what exactly is it that has been improved. And obviously with ornamentals, often it is simply the color of, the flower. And do you really need, like, I don't know, yet a different color columbine? Sometimes I feel, especially with ornamental plants, I sometimes think eventually all our plants will look the same, because each plant needs to have all the colors of the rainbow, it seems like, each species. And I kind of appreciate the fact that some plants come in red, some plants come in yellow, some plants are only blue. That kind of makes it fun to me. So, so that's one of those things. So then the other thing that I hadn't really thought about, but that I realized while going through these catalogs and these websites, is how new is the plant actually? Because it may be a new offering for this particular company, but that doesn't mean that that plant hasn't been around for a long time. already. It just sometimes what is new is just that that's like an heirloom variety that this particular company just started carrying. So you may think, oh, I'm buying the newest hottest plant. And actually, you've been purchasing it for the past 10 years already, and you may actually end up paying more money because at that particular company, it is being advertised as new. So, do your research and see what is new about this plant. Then another thing is what is lost. And I'll give you a great example, and that is the knockout rose. When the knockout rose came, everybody, was like elated, God knows whatever, here's a rose, disease resistant, God knows whatever. However, often when you breed one thing into a plant, it means that you lose something else. And in the case of the knockout roses, that meant that the scent was completely gone. And of course, a lot of people like to grow roses because they smell so nice. Well, a knockout rose does not have any scent. So, something's got to give. You can't keep all the genes active and participating. So you kind of want to see, what is lost. And the other thing you want to look at is where was this plant developed? Because let's face it, if this plant was developed in the state of Washington, well, is it going to grow well here? So some seed companies, they will just advertise their plants that they have developed on site. But the really good ones, they will not just only have developed those plants on site, they will then have send out the seeds or the plants to different test sites all over the US to see how this plant will perform in different regions. So you kind of want to see, what's the history of this plant? How long did it take them to develop this plant? Have they tested it all over the US? So, one of those things. Because if it was only grown in a climate that is completely different from ours, chances are you're going to spend a lot of money on the hottest new thing that is croak here. So, and we don't want that. Then the other thing is, like I said, they will try something that is new, but how is it a hybrid? So is this a plant that was developed in a cross, or is it an heirloom that has been rediscovered? Because each year the industry develops or discovers 2,000 new species. Now we lose some species too, but each year, mind you, 2,000 new species are onto the market. So the way that you can tell, and let me get my cursor here on the screen. The way that you can tell whether something is a hybrid, and it's very important because you cannot save the seeds from a hybrid. So the way that you can tell is it will either say F1, and that means that it's the next generation, or you will see these parentheses here, right? That means it has a name. So it means that it's not a straight species. It means that something has been altered. And in the case of the knockout rose, not only can you tell this, but you see there's a trademark. So it also means you cannot propagate this thing yourself. That's actually illegal because it has been patented. It has been trademarked. You can only buy it. And then the other way that you can tell that something, has been altered is because of this here, which means variety. So this is actually a honey locust. This is the botanical name for a honey locust. And this is the variety inermis, which means it doesn't have any thorns. Yay. So that is a bit of how you can tell that, a plant has changed. Some of these plants will occur naturally. You know, they have been found like that and then given a name. Some of them, like the Juliet, the F1, those have actually been bred. So let's go back to biology for just a second and let me show you what Mendel did, right? So here is, I'm sure you're all familiar with this. I'd like to think you're all familiar with this, but this is really short what exactly a hybrid is. So here we have two parent plants. And I know these are Mendel's peas plant, but let's just pretend for a second that these are tomato plants, just because, you know, so many of us grow tomatoes. So we're going to pretend that this is a very tall and vigorous tomato plant. And then this is a smaller but very tasty tomato plant. This one, not so much taste. This one, not so much vigor. Okay, so this company is going to cross these two. And what you end up with is the next generation. There it is, F1, right? They're all going to be identical because of dominant and recessive genes. They're all going to be identical. They're all going to be vigorous tomato plants with tasty tomatoes. Every them. You don't even have to think about it. So that is that F1 generation. They will all be the same because they came from these two parents, and this particular combination will give you a tall, vigorous plant with tasty tomatoes. Now, you think, oh, that is so cool. Let me save the seeds. Not so fast. Because of the way that genetics work in what they call the F2 generation, so this would be the seeds that you're saving, you're going to end up with a tall plant with not so tasty tomatoes. You're going to end up with two, so 50% of your plants will be tall and have tasty tomatoes, and one plant with 25% of your plants will not be vigorous but have tasty tomatoes, but they may croak because they're not vigorous. So this is why when you have a hybrid, an F1, they will not come true from seeds. It's just the way that our genetics work. So I just thought I'd throw that in there so that you know that when you get something that is F1, you will know for sure they're all going to be the same plants, but the seeds won't. That's the same thing with apples and stuff like that. So, and this sounds all really fancy and very modern and God knows whatever, and maybe GMO. However, we have been doing this for forever. Human beings are not dumb. So let's take corn. Once upon a time, our corn looked like this. It was, and here is the actual corn cob, if you will. So it had 4, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10. Usually, you know, it had just a few seeds. There happened to be 10. I was told 7, but hey, variety, right? So it was called teosinte, and actually it's still around. And Wayne Gilchrist at Sassafras Environmental Education Center, you know, we plant this every year just to show the kids where corn came from. So once upon a time, and here you can still see the habit that it really was a grass, you know, corn is still a grass, and it had these little seed heads with just a few seeds on it. And not only did it have just a few seeds, but the seeds actually would, you know, when they would be mature, they would just let go. They wouldn't hold on to the cob. They would just scatter all over the place. Well, if you're trying to feed yourself of that, not so smart, right? That's going to take A, a long time to gather, and B, if they just fall off of the seed head before you get to them, well, then you're in trouble. You're not going to get through the winter. So, you know, people are not dumb. So sometimes there were little stalks with more seeds. Sometimes they didn't let go. Sometimes by sheer variation, some of them were yellow, had a slightly different color, and were tastier, were sweeter. So people started saving those. They started saving the bigger seeds, the yellower seeds, the seeds that didn't let go of the stalk, the seeds that had more rows, and then eventually, through centuries, here we have our modern day corn. Obviously, there's less seed heads on a modern day corn, one or two, as opposed to, I don't know how many, but that's basically, we have done that. So, and we have done that to many, many, many vegetables and plants. A carrot once was just, just this kind of like whitish, puny, long, skinny root. But then, of course, they figured out it was edible. And then, of course, it went to the Netherlands where people started breeding it. And well, because of the House of Orange, had nothing to do with taste or beta carotene or gutless, whatever. But because, the king there belonged to the House of Orange, they made orange carrots. And that's what we got to eat. Duh. So who knows, right? The things we do. So anyway, so why do we do this? Well, we do this for a variety of reasons, right? Because we all need to eat at the end of the day. So, we do need to meet the growing demand for food in our global population. And then, there's other advantages. Our climate is changing. So it may be nice, especially if you're like looking, actually for ornamentals as well as vegetables. How do these plants, can you find a plant that will adapt better to the climate that you're in, that will handle drought better, or that will handle, our torrential rains better, or our increased temperatures and won't bolt as fast. So there's lots of reasons why we want to come up with new varieties. We live in an ever-changing world. And because here in our neck of the woods, our summers have become so much warmer and so moist, we are dealing with more and more diseases. Like last year, my vegetable garden, it was just the pits. And my tomatoes, they croaked all in August because they had so many diseases. And usually I plant a lot of heirlooms. And so this year I have told myself, nope, I guess I'll need to give up a little bit on the taste, but I gotta break that cycle of the diseases. So I am going to only purchase F1 hybrids that have the disease resistance that I am looking for. If you're a producer, you would like to have plants that produce more. Like I said, early maturing, if you live up north, or here, if you want to grow a cool weather crop, a cabbage, peas. Well, since our summers are getting so much hotter, especially if you want to, or lettuce, well, we can plant a little earlier, but it means that your window of opportunity to grow them has actually shrunk. So you probably want that, speeds it up by maybe a week or so, because that might make the difference between a plant that you can actually, a vegetable that you can actually harvest, or a vegetable that will just bolt and not do what you want. Some of these plants are better for the environment. And a perfect case of that is they're trying to develop a perennial wheat. And they're actually doing this not through genetic engineering, but by simple plant breeding, like people have been doing this for forever. And they're doing this in the Northwest. And the reason is, well, wheat is an annual crop, right? So it means that you have to, in a lot of cases, till the soil and, rotate the crop. However, wheat is also a grass, and grass usually has very, very deep roots and holds onto the soil. So if you could develop a perennial wheat that would just grow in that space for, like say a decade or something, then you wouldn't have to till the soil. You wouldn't have to move your crop, and it would be so much better for the environment because, you wouldn't compact the soil, you wouldn't release carbon into the air, you wouldn't cause erosion. So there's a lot of ways in which it would actually help the environment if certain crops behaved differently. And then, of course, we do also develop genetically modified organisms, for instance, golden rice. Rice is not yellow, rice is not golden, but there are places in the world where this is obviously the major food staple, and people also there have a notorious lack of vitamin A. So in golden rice, beta carotene has been bred through genetic modification into the rice to make sure that people can still grow what they're used to growing, but does well in their environment, but that at the same time will give them the nutrients that they would otherwise be lacking. So I'll leave it up to people whether, how much that will mess with the rest of the world, but it's a consideration. So that all sounds really, really good. However, here comes the however, right? So it does mean that, especially with food, because we are so narrowing down on certain plant species, that we have lost a lot of biodiversity. And that basically as a people, we are relying on very few crops to feed us. So that is maybe, there's a lot of species out there that are edible, that we could live off of, and yet we don't. And then, of course, within the species that we do eat, we're just narrowing things down even more. And that is not so good because think, for instance, Irish potato famine. Well, potatoes came from South Americans from like the highlands of Peru, were brought to Europe, but and there's a plethora of species. However, to Europe, they only took one species. So then in Ireland, they planted the one species. All the same, all genetically the same. Well, if you then get a disease, then everything fails and you get a serious famine. And the same is true for our bananas. So this is what once upon a time, this is a wild banana, a banana looked like. Lots and lots and lots of seeds. Not so much fun to eat, right? So, same as with corn, people started developing bananas, and now essentially, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's very high, like 99% of the bananas are now the Cavendish, not necessarily because it tastes so good, but basically because it travels really well and it grows really well, and it's got to come from the tropics all the way to here. So it travels really well. You can harvest it early and bring it to the grocery stores all over the world. Serious trouble though, because bananas, I didn't know this, but I saw this in Costa Rica. They actually grow by underground rhizomes, just like our Johnson grass. And then, when a stalk has carried fruit, they chop it down, and then a new stalk comes up somewhere. So it means that they are genetically identical. And over the years, there are now diseases and pests that this particular banana is very, very susceptible to. And that is basically the banana that is grown all over the place. And the same is true for papayas. And I know cacao has some issues too. Here you could see this is what a wild papaya looked like. This is already, the first like hybrid. And here is, what we now essentially grow for commerce. And well, if they're all the same, just like with the Irish potato famine, it means that they're all going to be susceptible to the same diseases. At the same time, it also means, since we're only growing like these kinds or the Cavendish banana, that are wild types, people are not really paying attention to those. So they are disappearing. So when you do need those genes that were in the wild types to maybe, breed more disease resistance or God knows whatever into these more commercial types, the species may be lost by the time you realize that you really needed those wild types. So that is a serious consideration. We do need to save our biodiversity, because otherwise everything will be the same and we could be wiped out in no time flat. That's just to give you some background information. So we'll go to these websites in a little bit. So I looked at some of these websites just to see, and some of them have very nicely listed all their new plants on like a similar page. So after I'm done with the presentation, we'll go to some of these websites. And like I said, in my garden, my tomatoes were horrible. I know that they had early blight, they had late blight, they had other fungal leaf spots. So what I will be doing is I'm going to buy F1 hybrids that are resistant to these particular diseases, because you have to pay attention to what, just because it says it is disease resistant, make sure that it is resistant to the diseases that are actually in your yard, right? Because, for instance, there's also verticillium wilt and fusarium wilt on tomatoes. Those happen to be soil-borne diseases that make your plants wilt. And that often happens in situations where you don't rotate your crops, or in greenhouses where they grow the same thing over and over and over again. Well, I know that I don't have those diseases in my soil. I have foliar diseases. So it doesn't make any sense for me to buy a tomato plant that is resistant to fusarium wilt, because then they're still going to get the leaf spots, and I'm still in the same trouble. So the plants that I've listed here are the ones that I think are really worth looking into buying new plants or hybrid plants. We all know that our zucchinis, our cucumbers, our pumpkins, they have some serious issues. So especially when it comes to things like downy mildew, and the same is with basil, and there is no cure for downy mildew. So plants that get downy mildew, that does them in. So there, it also really pays off. Downy mildew is here. And by the way, these are different strains, but it just, because our climate has changed, these plants are now very susceptible. So there, it does make sense to look if this particular plant, seed house sells a new variety that is resistant to downy mildew. I actually got from the Home and Garden Information Center, we are going to do like a seed giveaway, and I got a whole bunch of basil seeds that are in the Prospera series, which is resistant to downy mildew. So I'll send out a list with all the different seeds that I have, and you can like place an order, and then we'll distribute them through the library. The same thing with beans, right? There's a lot of diseases that could pester your beans, especially when it comes to anthracnose and rust. So once again, look for, if that's an issue in your yard, look for species that are resistant. And the same goes with pepper. They have bacterial leaf spots and viruses. And obviously, for a virus, as we now all well know, right, there's very little you can do except for, be resistant. In other words, get a vaccine, right? So because you can't spray for a virus, you can spray for a fungal disease, but once a plant gets a virus, that's it. So it pays off to look at those, to look at those seeds. Okay, so that's something about vegetable plants. So how are you going to go about doing research to see, what is new, what is not? Well, there is you'll see this in seed catalogs too. Something it will say AAS. That means that it is a all-American selection. And those plants, each year there are 3 winners, or there are winners in the ornamental category and in the edible category. And I think there's a 3rd category. And the nice part about this is a nonprofit organization, and they test all kinds of plants, and they test them at various locations within the US. So, and they do these test trials for years, and then eventually they will, pick a selection for that particular year. So if in a seed catalog or on a website, you see that something has that label AAS, you know that it has been tested and that it really means something. So that is one source where you can go to figure out whether a plant is worth spending money on or not, or whether it's just a hype. And then the other things for our region, the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society for Ornamental Plants, each year it gives gold medals to particular plants, to perennials, to shrubs, to trees, vines. And once again, those plants have also been gone through the ringer, and they have been tested. And those plants, all of those gold medal plants, will do really well in our mid-Atlantic region. And the same thing goes for Mount Cuba. They do extensive research on native cultivars, right? Because we have a lot of native plants, but because people don't only want yellow coreopsis, but they also want pink coreopsis and God knows whatever kind of coreopsis, right? There's a lot of, or Echinacea, they don't want just a purple tall Echinacea, but they want a white Echinacea and an orange Echinacea and one that's smaller, one that doesn't float, So, and like I said, when you start breeding, you may lose things. And of course, people are particularly worried about what this does in terms of nutrient value for pollinators. So Mount Cuba does research on all these native cultivars, and usually their trials with a particular plant runs for like 2 or 3 years. And then, they do count however many pollinators visit a plant. And so then eventually they will come out with a report. Their latest report just came out this past week, is on Echinacea, so on purple coneflower. They tested 75 different taxa in 5 different species for a 3-year period, and you can see what they tested for. And the 3 that are listed here, those were their 3 top performers. You can get this report from their website. It's free. You can download it. Their reports are very, very good, because look, it will tell you exactly, because that's a compound flower, right? So it will actually tell you exactly what the flower structure looks like. That's pretty darn cool, if you ask me. A composite flower, this is. And then here, it actually tells you how, which ones were the top performers, which ones the pollinators, the bees, and the other pollinators. Actually, these are just 2 of the 24 pages in the report. So it tells you exactly which ones were, most visited by pollinators. And yes, I will send you all these links afterwards. So, in other words, got to figure out what it is that you're looking for, right? Do you need a new color this, or a smaller growing that, or a disease resistant, God knows whatever? Because of course, the new plants, they may cost a little bit more money, because it does take time to develop them, and it does take research and manpower. So do you really need it? And if it is new, does it actually meet your needs? That's something you definitely want to look at. And then once you have figured it out, go to some of these websites and see where they have been tested, how long they have been tested. Are these plants actually going to do what you want them to do? Are they still good for the environment? You know, do they still attract the pollinators that you so much want to have? Because let's face it, if you are going to have a nice little Echinacea that is orange and yellow and green and God knows whatever, right? And there's not a single bee that's going to come to it, well, then you're not going to be happy either, right? So that is what I had to say. So let me stop sharing my screen for just a sec. And then I'm going to go to some of these websites just to help you navigate through these guys. Hold on.
And as Sabine is starting to pull up more information, if people have questions that they want to put
Yes,
in the chat, you're welcome to. You can also unmute yourself and just ask a question. We keep this
absolutely.
part pretty informal.
Oh yeah. So here is the Mount Cuba Center. Oh, am I sharing, Annie?
You are sharing, yes.
Okay. So here is the Mount Cuba Center website. And I mean, they have done research on coreopsis, echinaceas, asters, phlox, both for the sun garden as well as the shade garden. There are it's just incredible. So you can go to the Mount Cuba website and let's see. You know, their whole trial garden, look, helenium, phloxes, all of these, bee balm, baptisia, you know, because of course, you know, false blue indigo, but now we have yellow indigo and we have white indigo, and they're actually really nice and pretty. And sometimes it's actually been surprising because there are species where the cultivars will actually attract more pollinators than the straight species. Go figure. So very, very, very nice. And like I said, euchre, there's one. All of these you can access and they're free. You can download them, you can peruse them. And all of these will do, since Mount Cuba is just a little further north than we are, all of these will do really well in the Mid-Atlantic region. Okay, so this is the website of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. If you've ever gone to the flower show in Philadelphia, I'm sure you're familiar with them because, you know, they organize the flower show. And here you can find their gold medal plants, and there's their label. You can search this website, and they have tested them. So it's very nice. So once again, there's a database that you can, here we go, that you can search, you can filter, disease, you know, deer resistance. You can do just about anything in this database. It has everything, you know, trees, shrubs, you name it. So that's definitely worth looking for, you know, what light conditions. Anyway, there is the website of the All-American Selection Plants. And once again, there's actually a display garden in Frederick, and there is a display garden in Salisbury. So isn't that nice? You know, at schools where they have tested some of these, where they're essentially test sites for some of these selections. And well, in different times you could visit them. So here you can search them, and you can put in filters. See, you can search for annuals, vegetables. But like, for instance, I found this one. I'm like, oh, cool. You know, for when we do container plantings, you know, peppers in a pot. Well, then you need to read this, because I think I saw that this, see, it's early maturing, and this will do, this is better for like gardens. Look, this is where it's been tested in the Great Lakes, right? So that is definitely nice that it's a container plant. However, it is very specific because it's early maturing for the Great Lakes. We are far removed from the Great Lakes. I lived in Ithaca, New York. Let me tell you, slightly different climate. So that is probably not going to perform very well here. So do read the fine print. Then another one, this is pretty cool. I don't know if you guys heard of Dan Barber, he's a chef, Blue Hill Restaurant. Anyway, they have also started developing very, very nice seeds. It's called Row 7 seeds. I got some from my son for Christmas. And the one that really struck me is the habanero pepper. Who knew? A habanero pepper without the heat. So it has the flavor and the fragrance, but apparently you're not going to be on fire. Now, I have a pretty high heat tolerance, but even habaneros are too much for me. So, that's kind of cool. So these are definitely developed for the high-end gourmet restaurants, but regular people can buy them too. And here's one of my favorite squashes, a Trombocino Squash, where all the seeds are really concentrated in the bottom. And this is one of those squashes that is resistant to not just downy mildew, but it also is resistant to squash vine borers because that species is not as susceptible to squash vine borers as our regular zucchinis. So I've given up on regular zucchinis and I only grow this species. So, and apparently I'm getting a purple snow pea too. So who knew, right? Then Johnny's, I do want to, so there's 102 apparently new, 103 in the meantime, new different vegetables. Now that doesn't mean that there's actually that many different, because they also list all their like organic and non-organic seeds separately. But there is a lot. Like lettuce. Do you really need yet another furly head new lettuce and pay a enormous amount of money for it, right? And then of course a lot of times with like, especially like the purple peas that I just showed you, looks really cool in the garden. However, usually anything that's purple, once you cook it, it turns green, right? Think purple asparagus. So nice display, but you're not going to be eating purple stuff. And if you have purple potato, you'll just turn a blah gray. Anyway, so there you go. So apparently there's also a lot of new spinaches out there, and some of them are disease resistant. I have some spinach disease going on in my yard. So interesting. So I guess the newest, hottest thing is, because here's another pepper. This is a jalapeno, not a habanero, but a jalapeno pepper, right? So jalapeno flavor, no heat. God only knows. But if you like the flavor of a jalapeno, but you're not that heat resistant, that may just be the thing for you. Let's see. I think
Sabine, I will mention that there's a comment in the chat box
yeah.
from someone who says that he has grown habaneros for a couple of years and that they definitely don't have all the heat bred out of them and are still quite hot. So,
oh, okay. Well, that's, I like that. So, but that is going to be interesting. Well, I have to say with peppers, it depends a lot, right? Because you can, even on one plant, it depends on how much rainfall we get and how hot it is. So even within the same season on one plant, your peppers can have different heats. The drier it is, the hotter the pepper will be. So if your pepper matures and develops, say that the beginning of the season was very, very wet, the peppers from that plant may not be so hot, but then say that the end of the season was really, really dry, then all of a sudden your peppers are going to pack a lot more heat. And you may have thought, that's a pretty okay plant. Let me bite into this one. Maybe not so much if this, if the growing circumstances have changed. And then the last one, this is high mowing. So they, you can search there and they have all kinds of, their newest, their disease resistant ones. They have a whole section on growing them in containers. So yes, so there's a lot to go through. It's going to get really cold tomorrow. So guess what you'll be doing tomorrow? Aha, right? It's going to be a good day to peruse all these websites and things. Okay, well, let's get to all the, I can't see your questions and chats when I'm in share screen mode. Well, I can, but every time I change the screen, it disappears and I have to click on it. So
We actually don't have any questions in the chat at the moment. Just a couple of comments that have come in through the presentation. But if anyone has questions, you're welcome to type them in or to unmute yourself and ask.
Or comments, like if you have grown something and said, yeah, don't waste your money on that, or that was a really good purchase. Like I said, it's different for everyone. So, so yes, please do share. Now I have to say, somebody here says that the only tomato that did well for them is Rutgers. I am not sure. I think that may be a hybrid too. I'm not quite sure. I have to look that up. But yeah, just because something is a hybrid, there's obviously no guarantee. And I've had years too that the hybrids were just absolute miserable failures, or they tasted like nothing. And often you can tell in a name of a hybrid what it was meant for, right? Because there's some tomatoes out there that are called Mountain Magic. Yeah, we're not in the mountains. Let's just say that, right? That indicates that those were made for cooler climates. So how do you know what disease is in your garden? Well, you do your research, right? And if you can't figure it out, you take pictures and you send them to me. You ask me questions. You, do I have a substitute for Gilberti's? I do not. I have been looking, and I think actually that Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, Bill, may have Gilberti's too. And if not Southern Exposure, it may be Territorial Seeds. I don't have a catalog for Southern Exposure, but I do have one for, let's see, do they have that one? Nope. Yeah, I know. Now, let me say a word about the seeds. As you may have noticed, a lot of websites, now Johnny's is already sold out of quite a number of seeds, sadly. Or they're sold out of like the Home Gardeners packages, right? And so you can only buy like 10 pounds of tomato seeds. Well, who's going to need 10 pounds of tomato seeds? Not so good. And then some websites, it will say you can't order right now. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of seeds, but just as with everyone, all the seed companies are having issues with getting enough employees in to handle all the orders. So for instance, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which I really, really like because their seeds come from Virginia, And it's the only seed house that I know of that really develops seeds here in our region. And of course, they will have adapted to our climate. Whereas seeds that come from upstate New York or Washington States, where a lot of the seed houses are, their genes are not quite adapted to our climate. So if I can, I like to buy from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. Now they only open for like an hour at 10 a.m. for your to place your order, and then they close again because they can't handle the number of orders considering how many people they can bring in to actually fill those orders. So it's not that they're out of seeds, it's just that with the manpower that they can have within buildings, they just can't handle the volume. Yes, so Oriental Squash, so it's the Cucurbita moschato that has more disease resistance and has more resistance to squash vine borers than zucchinis and stuff like that. So if you buy plants, so if you buy a plant, if you buy an ornamental plant, right, that is a hybrid, it will usually have, it will be, it will have that extra, that third, that name that is in parentheses that indicates that it's not a straight species. So that's how you can tell it. Usually won't say F1, but there will be something in parentheses, and that tells you that it is a hybrid. Our winterberry hollies, right? They'll be called like Nellie Stevens or this, or Southern Gentleman, which indicates that's a male. So that's how you know that it's not a straight species. So, okay, very good. And yes, well, that's the other thing with tomatoes, of course. Indeterminate versus determinate tomatoes. So determinate tomatoes, they will develop all their tomatoes all at once, and then they're pretty much done. You may get some tomatoes, and the indeterminate kinds, those are the kinds that will keep on going forever and ever and ever, and just push out tomatoes all season long. I like to grow indeterminate ones, but maybe I should at some point grow determinate ones, plant them really early, and harvest everything, before the major disease hits. So, Bill, I will look at whether I can find a Gilberti somewhere for you. And otherwise, I may have some seeds left. I don't know. And since I'm not going to plant them this year, will I not plant them this year? Because those are really my favorite paste tomatoes. So we'll see. Any other questions or anything else to share? Maybe I should try a Rutgers tomato this year. Interesting thoughts. Maybe I need to give it a try. Anything we can do now? No. So here's the thing. The downy mildew actually doesn't overwinter here. It overwinters in the south, in Florida. So good thing we're not living in Florida for many reasons. And it actually drifts up with tropical storms. And, because it's a fungus, and so it likes moisture. And so eventually it comes here. Or we have a snafu that, like basil plants or tomato plants or God knows whatever, were grown in some greenhouse down south, and they didn't realize they had the diseases, and they're all trucked up here, and then all of a sudden, it goes a lot faster than in other years that all of a sudden we have that disease here. And there are trackers, the same thing for like late blight and stuff like that. You can actually search online, and you can see where the disease is and where it has been reported. So there's very little we can do right now, because it doesn't survive our winters here. Not yet, at least. So in general, regardless of whether or not it does survive our winters here, I guess I'm a little OCD when it comes to that. I do try to clean up really, really well, right? And especially like all the diseased basil leaves or diseased leaves from plants in the cucumber family. I just, or diseased plant materials from my tomatoes. I just want to get it out of there, just to really be safe, because you never ever know what all those crazy genes are going to do and what all those fungi are going to do, and whether they are. The thing is, they need to mate. They need to actually not just propagate asexually, but they also need to find a partner. And they're not here yet, but they're coming. Gilberti is it's an heirloom. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous paste tomato. Super versatile. You could eat it straight up, not use it as a paste tomato. It's meaty. It has very few seeds. It has just a wonderful, wonderful flavor. It will go on forever. There have been years that I have still harvested Gilbertis in my garden in October. I mean, it will go on. I mean, it becomes a big plant. It will go on and it's not like the tiny little, like some Marzano paste tomatoes, but these are like, can you see that? Like this big. I mean, they are big. They are usually as big as my hand. But it is an heirloom, and it was just, it didn't make it till October this past year. Let's just put it that way. But if I can get away with it, yeah, that is one of my absolute favorite tomatoes to grow, just because it is so versatile, right? So I could eat it in a salad, but I can also make tomato sauce, beautiful tomato sauce. Oh, and roast it. It is just fabulous. So there you go. And it's very productive. Yay, everybody go buy Gilberti tomato seeds, because then the demand will go up, right? And we all know what's going to happen. More demand, right? Then hopefully the market will adjust and we can buy them at other places too. So that's how that works, I've been told.
Fantastic. Well,
share.
We are at 11, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I also want to invite everyone back. Next week, Sabine will be debunking some common myths about gardening practices. The week after that, we will be talking about the basics of designing or redesigning garden space. And the week after that, we'll be talking about container gardening and raised beds. And again, registration for those programs is through the library's website, or you can give us a call at 410-778-3636. I know the number.
Yes.
And thanks so much for being here today. Thank you, Sabine, for your expertise. It's been wonderful as always.
Thanks everyone for attending, because it wouldn't be any fun if there wasn't anyone there, right? So always fun to see your faces and get all those questions. And if you think about a question afterwards, or if there's something that you want to share afterwards, just just email me or Annie, and I'll make sure to address it. I'm also obviously going to send you the PDF of the presentation and all the links, so that you don't have to look for it, and so that you can find what you're looking for this year, and maybe save yourself some money in the meantime, right? Who knows? Okay. Yay.
Thank you.